Mrs. Brown's family handbook, and basically it was how to raise and make sure that your family is messed up, because it's important that your family is messed up. You don't come from an ordinary family. Few shows have changed British television quite like Mrs. Brown's Boys. What started as a theater play turned into a worldwide hit, winning awards, hitting huge Christmas ratings, and filling up huge concert halls across the UK and beyond. But while fans laughed at the mistakes, the mess and Brendan O'Carroll's quick jokes, something way more disturbing was happening behind the scenes. One by one, main cast members left the show. Some left for really personal reasons, others because of fights that couldn't be fixed. And each person who left showed a side of Mrs. Brown's Boys that the world wasn't ready to see. The birth of Mrs. Brown's Boys. When Mrs. Brown's Boys first came on television, it was nothing short of a game changer. British comedy was known for its smart writing and clean delivery, but here was a show that seemed to throw out all the rules completely. It wasn't afraid to laugh at itself. It wasn't afraid to be messy, and it definitely wasn't afraid to let the audience in on the joke. Viewers watched by the millions, making it one of the BBC's biggest comedy hits of the decade. But while the laughter filled living rooms and the cast looked like one big happy family, there were things happening behind the scenes that most fans never imagined. And when certain cast members eventually walked away, the reasons weren't always what people expected. The idea behind Mrs. Brown's Boys began long before the 2011 television debut. Brendan O'Carroll, a stand-up comedian and writer from Dublin, had already been building the world of Agnes Brown through his theater plays and a bunch of books. In these early shows. The character of Mrs. Brown was already making audiences laugh with her blunt humor, sharp tone, and everyday wisdom. The stage shows, often performed in smaller theaters, had a loyal fan base. And by the time television came calling, Brendan had spent years building the world that would later blow up onto screens across the globe. What gave the show its special identity was how much of Brendan's own life he put into it. He didn't just create a sitcom. He brought in his closest people to help tell the story. His wife, Jennifer Gibney, played Kathy Brown, Annie's daughter. His sister, Eilish O'Carroll, took on the role of Winnie McGugan. Agnes' loyal but scatterbrained neighbor, his son, Danny O'Carroll, became Buster Brady, one of the show's funniest and most recognizable characters. Even close friends were pulled into the cast. This family-based casting gave the show a kind of chemistry that was impossible to fake. On screen, the characters argued, laughed, and made mistakes. And off-screen, that same closeness gave the show its heart. From the very beginning, Mrs. Brown's Boys didn't play by traditional sitcom rules. Brendan made the unusual decision to leave bloopers in the final cut. If a cast member forgot a line, stumbled through a scene, or even broke down laughing, it stayed in. The show also broke the fourth wall constantly. Agnes might suddenly turn to the camera and talk to the viewers directly, reminding everyone that they were part of the fun. The live studio audience, whose laughter was never turned down or replaced, added another layer of energy. And the result was a show that felt chaotic in the best way, and fans loved it instantly. This gamble paid off in a huge way because the show quickly became one of the most watched comedies in the UK. Pulling in millions of viewers per episode. Christmas specials became a national tradition, taking over holiday schedules and bringing families around the television. Mrs. Brown's Boys even won BAFTA awards, cementing its place in British comedy history. But its reach didn't stop there. The show found unexpected success in other countries, especially in Australia, Canada, and South Africa, where viewers connected with its universal humor and unpolished charm. Of the most surprising parts of the show's story is that Brendan himself never planned to play Agnes Brown. The original plan was for a woman to take the role, But when the actress couldn't make it to the recording, Brendan stepped in temporarily. However, what was supposed to be a short-term fix became permanent. And Brendan's version of Agnes, complete with wigs, dresses, and sharp one-liners, became the heart of the series. In fact, over time, fans couldn't imagine anyone else in the role. Continuity also came from cast members who had been with Brendan since the stage days. Rory Cowan, who played Rory Brown, had been part of the character's story since the 1990s, long before television fame arrived. His long involvement gave the show a sense of history, as if audiences were stepping into a world that had been lived in for decades rather than something newly created for the BBC. It all came together to create a sitcom that looked easy, even though years of work and trying different things had gone into shaping it. For audiences, Mrs. Brown's Boys was a breath of fresh air, something different, fun, and unpredictable. But while viewers were laughing at the crazy antics on screen, things were much less simple once the cameras stopped rolling, because behind the bright lights, roaring laughter, and international fame, the cast and crew faced pressures and challenges that threatened the harmony of Brendan's family project. And when those struggles started spilling into the open, it became clear that not everyone would stay part of Mrs. Brown's Boys forever. Behind-the-scenes challenges. For audiences, Mrs. Brown's Boys looked like a chaotic comedy where every slip-up was part of the charm, and every episode felt like an invitation to sit in on a family gathering. But behind the curtain, the reality was much tougher. The laughter on screen often hid long hours, creative disagreements, and the toll of keeping up with a show that had grown into a global hit. As the series expanded beyond the TV studio into live tours and yearly specials, the pressure only grew heavier, and it started to show on the people who brought the characters to life. One of the biggest challenges was the touring schedule. What began as a way to connect with fans outside the television broadcast quickly became a never-ending routine. The cast traveled all over the UK and Ireland with packed schedules, often performing multiple shows a week. The live productions were hugely successful, selling out arenas and keeping audiences entertained. But for the people on stage, it was exhausting. Touring meant weeks away from home and missing birthdays, anniversaries, and other important family moments. What might have seemed like a dream job to outsiders was in reality a heavy commitment that put stress on personal lives. But that wasn't the only problem, because the show also faced creative pressure. Brendan O'Carroll was not only the star of the show, but also its creator, writer, and driving force. You bring this up at every family gathering. You ruined your father's funeral with this. His control over the scripts and production meant that every detail went through him. This tight grip made sure everything stayed consistent and kept the show true to his vision. But it also left limited space for other cast members to shape their characters or influence storylines. For some, this structure worked perfectly because Brendan's formula was clearly successful and the audience loved it. But for others, it created frustrations. With so little room for improvisation or creative input, some actors began to feel like they were just along for the ride rather than being part of creating the project. The production style added another layer of difficulty. Unlike many sitcoms that rely on multiple takes and post-production polish, Mrs. Brown's Boys was filmed in front of a live studio audience with very few retakes. That meant the pressure was always on. Timing had to be perfect, and the energy needed to stay high from start to finish. The format rewarded quick wit and confidence, but it also demanded a lot from the cast. Mistakes weren't hidden. They were accepted as part of the humor. While audiences loved this spontaneity, the cast carried the weight of knowing that almost anything that happened on stage might end up on screen forever. Unfortunately, the emotional toll of this pace eventually became too difficult to ignore. Yearly Christmas specials, which were among the show's most watched events, created extra stress for the cast. These episodes were high-stakes productions designed to meet the huge expectations of fans who made Mrs. Brown's Boys a holiday tradition. However, behind the laughter and festive set designs, the cast often fought fatigue and burnout. Performing under those circumstances, especially year after year, wore people down. Brendan himself wasn't immune to the strain. As the show's leader, he carried the heaviest workload, including acting, writing, producing, and steering the creative direction. While his energy seemed limitless on screen, off-screen he dealt with his own health concerns and the weight of keeping the entire machine running. For someone who had started with small stage plays, the transformation into a worldwide comedy brand came with pressure that never really let up. All of these factors combined to create an environment that was way more demanding than the audience ever saw. The joy that filled living rooms around the world was real, but it came at a cost. And when the pressure grew too heavy, it didn't just cause tension within the cast. It spilled into controversies that made their way into headlines. These controversies would ultimately help explain why some of the most familiar faces decided to walk away from Mrs. Brown's Boys, the controversies that followed the show. For years, Mrs. Brown's Boys projected the image of a